So first person I'm going to introduce is Steve Cox. Steve has spent the first 10 years of his working career as a consulting design engineer. He's been assisting the public water systems all over New England. Since 2001, he has worked directly for public water utilities in various management roles. And for the past 3 years, he has been the superintendent at Kennebunk Port Wells, known as KKW. Kathleen Chapin has over 35 years in the water industry and has seen significant changes over the way we do business. And Kathleen is currently project lead on a new billing system being installed at her utility. Steve Gregoire. Steve has spent 15 years at a small family business. He took his experience in customer service, mechanical ability, and troubleshooting skills to the water operations in 2007. He is now the manager of the Southbridge Water Department in Massachusetts, operated by Whitewater. Steve is in the process of implementing a new meter reading software system, and he is also the only person I know who builds and races his own dragster. Wayne Brockway. Wayne has 43 years of accounting and business management experience. He has served the past 28 years as the treasurer of KKW, and he is currently the acting treasurer of NEWA. And Wayne is the current project lead of a new accounting system being installed at his utility. Greg Bravelli is a licensed Massachusetts master plumber and has spent the last 12 years in the water industry. Greg has managed mass meter replacements and AMI, AMR deployments consisting of over 150,000 meter installations. He has performed accuracy testing, repairs, maintenance of most manufacturers' meters, AMR, and AMI systems. So now that we are clearly surrounded by the smartest people on the planet here, let's dive in for some questions to share their experiences. Steve Cox, you're on the top of my screen here, so let's start with you.
Well, I think I'd lead that by saying that when I first got here, I didn't know a lot about the business platforms that KKW used. And so I asked a lot of questions. It wasn't necessarily in my wheelhouse, but I did hear a number of frustrations with the platform we were on. And we did not have an asset management piece to it, and that was a goal. Every time we saw a demo of an asset management piece of our current platform, it was a utter failure. And so I listened and listened and listened a lot and said, you know what, if nothing else, we need to do an evaluation of our current platform and have somebody help us make it do what it's supposed to do. And if it can't, then let's consider others.
Okay, thank you. Kathleen, what I would say is in most utilities I've been in, if I walk up to the supervisor of customer service and billing and I say, hey, by the way, you're getting a new billing system, I see this look that looks more like a horror film. What made you want to do that, or were you convinced to do it? What was that process like?
Well, actually, I'll credit it to the new management. I know he did start asking a lot of questions. I think we'd been doing it so long, we didn't know what was broken. Brought in a consultant, identified where our problems were. And I went from an avid, no way am I going to switch billing systems, to really being on board and embracing it. So.
As a follow-on question to that, what was the point when all of a sudden you went, wow, this is so broken that I'm excited? What was that moment, or what was?
Well, I think part of it was we did many demos of different software platforms. I would say probably close to 8, if not more. And it was done in a way we called it speed dating. So it was like really quick, half an hour, no fluff, no bravado. We actually asked the questions, our team, like, this doesn't work for us right now, show it to us. And they did. And we kind of went from that 8, narrowed out a couple immediately, and then went back for a second, try, and a third try, I believe, before we really got it nailed down.
Hey, Drew, I think one of those aha moments though was when we were actually evaluating the latency of the customer service platform. And we had a little customer who actually liked to pay her bill weekly. She liked to come in and pay $5 every week. And the latency that created in the system was ridiculous. We would sit there for 90 seconds or more to have a screen open up. And the consultant who happened to be there said, that's not just latency, that's broken. And we didn't know it.
It was when you pull back the onion on it, the onion layer, and you see below it, it's actually, as your gut is right. Steve Gregoire, on, I know you're doing a meter reading system software upgrade, but on the asset management side, I would say in most of the utilities we work with, you have pushed your system to the most. Can you give me some insight on when you guys did switch from paper and maps to asset management system, and how did that go?
I've got an interesting perspective on all of this, because I took a route that I hope some people get to take, but not everyone will. When I came in the industry in 2007, I was a mechanic, and I started as a distribution tech, ground level, mowing lawns. Just wanted to get in the industry, and worked my way up to where I am now through meter reading, and then got into the treatment plant. Saw what technology can do working at a treatment plant, getting promoted, coming back to distribution while running the whole ship, and seeing, wow, there's a lot of need here for automation. When I started, we were still reading meters with the meter books, where you walked to each house, touched the gun, wrote the number down for 4,800 houses. And it was easy to see where your deficiencies were, where your inefficiencies were. And the same thing with asset management. We were, as you mentioned earlier, we were taking a gigantic map of the town and highlighting a street yellow this year when we exercised all the gate valves. And you've got this map on the wall with just highlighted colors all over it. Looks like you brought it into kindergarten and let the kids go crazy on it, connecting the dots. And I try to always take the perspective of make it better for the next generation. And don't ever use the phrase, that's how we've always done it, because it's so easy to get trapped in that rabbit hole. So we implemented an asset management system in 2016. Huge benefits there in time management, record keeping. And now, like you had mentioned earlier, we're upgrading our meter software. Again, in 2007, we had no software. It was paper, it was books, stacks and stacks of meter books. We went to Itron in 2012, and now we're upgrading to the newest version of Itron as we speak. I don't even have access to get into it yet. But you can see that the customers have more needs. They want to know why their bill's high. They want to see that historical graph, and you can make that stuff manually, but the newer systems out there will do it for you if you learn how to leverage it.
So one of the things I'd like, when you decided you wanted asset management, what did the town, what did Whitewater say when you're like, hey, we've been doing it this way. This is the way we've always done it, right? None of our utilities, we ever hear that, right? That's like the common term. How did you get them to make that leap? I mean, what was?
So we started small. We decided we were going to work on our backflow program, which was still on carbon paper. And we were going to work on our gate valves. It was a very small buy-in at the time, just a few user logins to the system. That's where we vetted many systems. And so the buy-in wasn't huge at first, and we've kind of built it out incrementally from there. And since then, the town, the DPW director, has seen the value of it and has supported that investment each year to grow our assets. They've now implemented it on the sewer system. They're working on catch basins. They're working on actually cemeteries. We're learning how to use it for cemetery management, not to be too morbid. But yeah, the buy-in's been good because they can see it grow. I didn't drop this huge anchor on them and say, oh my God, it's going to cost us this much money. I showed them the value first, and then we grew it from there.
Okay, it's interesting because, saying that, if you look at like a demo of an asset management system, it does everything, right? And who wants to take on that project where if you say, we're going to use it just for this, You've had a, just knowing what you've done, and, I think you are basically the super user of your particular platform in the country. So that's, I think, a great track record on that. Wayne, over to you. Go ahead. Yep.
We started so small because we also knew that if I threw this massive system and 10 tablets at my crew, that some of the guys, especially I'm one of them now, but some of the more silver staff members were going to throw back at me and it was going to fail. So we just started small, started incrementally, got that staff buy-in so that you weren't hearing chirping in the background about people being unhappy. And that always gets back to the town. So we got like everybody on different layers and different levels on board with it.
I think you're touching on I think what I have seen is the biggest issue, right? Why am I going to take the risk of coming up with a new idea and getting it implemented, fighting for the budget, and then get maybe attacked by my own people because it's painful, right? There's no system implementation that isn't painful. Wayne, you are the guy that almost everybody on this call has to go to first to open up the checkbook. From an accountant perspective, I know how accountants are known for being wild and crazy and risky, as in no. How did you look at that when you were getting, hey, we want to upgrade some systems? What was what it was going to impact you on the accounting side of your accounting system that's being upgraded, but also the money, and you answer directly to, your board. How did you deal with that?
Well, first of all, I like to say accountants actually make actuaries make accountants look exciting. So I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but yeah, it was an interesting task because initially, just to say, we had taken an overview of all of our departments at Steve's lead to really look at everything holistically and what everyone was doing. And what quickly surfaced was our needs to change our business platforms. And when we got to that realization and got to the acceptance ourselves, we realized we couldn't just make those management decisions and push it out to everybody. We worked on the buy-in, as you say. We did that with our internal staff, but we also did it with the board. We had a committee, I think of, I don't know, at least a dozen people. And one of them was one of our board of trustees who was in the utility field. He's retired now, but had significant knowledge of software. So he was sort of a little more objective because he's a board member, but because he's not here day to day. And so it all gelled together to come up to, I think, a comprehensive result. But I'd have to say there's certainly fear in my mind. How much is this going to cost? We all know that costs are rising. And when I was pleasantly surprised when we pulled it all together and compared the incremental cost or difference from our existing platform to where we were headed, and adding asset management, which we didn't even have. And so there was an incremental increase in cost, but it was really pennies considering the cost of some asset management systems out there.
I think the no matter whether it's new mainline pipe, new software, somebody's got to get that. So showing that ROI, the return on investment. Why are we spending this money? I'm a taxpayer in my town. My town says they want to spend $30 million. What am I getting out of it? Is it really good enough? So I think that buy-in is critical.
I think it needs a two-way street. I think that's where a lot of people mess up at the beginning. I think the office staff and the superintendent and all the higher ups need to initiate the conversation with the field workers and say, what about X product is easy or difficult from your side versus what I see on the back end in my software is nice and shiny, and actually compare the two, because both pieces are necessary to complete a project and to do a project well. And I think that if you start from day one involving your staff from the bottom to the top, and each direction, left and right, you could even be involving other departments like the finance department, involving as many people as possible. And coming from a plumber, I got another one for you, is involve the plumbing inspector from the town in your project. That's where some people don't involve that person. And I was involved in a very big city that 10% of all the accounts needed a plumbing permit pulled and a water meter installed in it because the buildings didn't have meters. And they'd never told the plumbing inspector. I introduced myself to the plumbing inspector after a kickoff meeting and introduced the plumbing inspector to the meter project.
Mm-hmm. That's, I mean, you talk about a scenario of whoops, we forgot, that's, and I think that scenario of buy-in on all levels. And I think it's extremely important. I'm going to show a slide of going into the next question of implementation. One of the questions that's being asked is in the chat is, what about, from the asset management, getting down to meters and endpoints and collectors, specifically to an AMI system? Steve Gregoire, I'd ask you, asset management systems, for people who don't know, they will literally, they'll show you where it can get to the nut and bolt of the chair that you're sitting on, right? That is obviously too micro. Greg, or Steve rather, Steve Gregoire, what that rollout, when did you go from, the tanks and the pumps down to the meters, the endpoints, and start to filter through that? How long did that take?
We probably rolled it out over 18 months, from starting with the first work order that we implemented to doing everything. We're still building work orders. We're still creating new systems. That last little thing that I didn't think to introduce into the system, we're still doing that. But as far as, buy-in to get everybody to want to get to the point where we're doing meter change outs and the nitty-gritty work orders, I started with the biggest pain point. What are the guys grumbling about first? They hated doing carbon paper on backflows. They hated chasing the paper. So we got rid of that first. And they said, oh, this is kind of nice. They hated tracking what gate valve they exercised. So you kind of pick the biggest pain point first and attack it. And usually everybody goes, oh, okay, this is pretty good. And don't throw it all at them at once. We also did a little bit of us versus them mentality, where I said, hey guys, the admin hates this program. She doesn't like that we're changing. And all the guys said, oh, good, we're going to use it then, because nothing is more fun than aggravating the admin. So then when we get to meter change ups, that sort of thing, the work orders we've created are pretty comprehensive. They're not scribbling down stuff in the field. They just, look at the meter head, type in the number, look at the new meter head, take a picture of it. They don't have to record those numbers. And when it gets sent back, it's all there for the office. So now they don't have the office nagging them for, hey, where's that meter card? Hey, you fat fingered this number, or you got bad handwriting. So, if you get everybody involved, like it's already been said, and you try to make good work orders, but then take feedback when they don't like it, they really start to come around. And next thing you know, you're getting more responses than you probably want. And you're like, hey, go out in the field and do some work. Stop telling me how to build work orders. But that's good. It's good input to get. You try never to discourage it.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to switch over to probably why there's a feeling of let a sleeping dog lie, or we've always done it this way. This diagram here, this was a utility that we worked with, and they brought us in to what they thought was a problem. They wanted to, there was some complaining, and after poking the bear a little bit, this was where they wanted to start. And I'm going to say that this utility, Steve Cox might be very familiar with. And as we looked at this, the next thing that was found was there were other problems. Now, in this deal, it was, I'm going to say nothing was broken from our perspective, right? It works. Bills went out, inventories gets done. KKW is one of the few utilities that we work with that has its own construction department. So inventory and things was quite heavy, but it was either weak or there was room for improvement. So Steve, for you, you thought you were getting biting this piece of the elephant and going to finance this part of the deal, and it turned into this. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I came over from a utility who had electronic work orders, and I knew how efficient that was, and I knew we needed it. I also knew that inventory was a nightmare in terms of labor and time and all that. And I knew we also needed asset management, because as soon as I walked through the door, we had an employee with the title asset manager, but we had no platform for him to work on. Yet had been in the pipeline. So it really got bigger, quicker, just by that alone. And I think the evaluation, when we started working with the third-party consultant, just morphed on its own into the holistic approach. We want to make sure we do this once. My goal right along was, and I told the employees this to try and get buy-in, is our customers deserve timely, accurate bills for the water they intend to use. Our employees deserve the best tools they can use, whether they're software or tools in the field. And our customers also deserve a customer experience that's worthy of today, not 20 or 30 years ago. And so how do you do all that? That's my vision. And so once we pulled it all together, we saw it was more than just customer service and billing. It was the entire package.
So with that, leads into, we have a question from the field from Elijah, and it's also talked about a lot. I'm a field guy. I am awesome at what I do. I'm maybe 5 years away from retirement, and I love my flip phone. And now you're asking me to use this app or this computer or this tablet and learn things I can't. I'm telling you, I can't do this. I want to gear this towards, first, I want to go for Kathleen, because part of the new system in the work orders that's been discussed in your process, that's directly affecting a field operation of 30 guys that have been doing paper time tickets, paper work orders for their entire career. And now it's going to be done differently. What are you seeing from the office side on how that's being received or not well received? What's a common denominator of how this is not a good idea, or what's a good idea? What have you heard from the office side?
Well, the office side, I think for one, they're more familiar with technology, given what they do. They have AMI, a system for remote meter reading, the billing software. We have a customer portal that has like online payment options. So the buy-in in the office was not difficult. Certainly there's some angst over it, now that we got this, even if it's broken, we know how to do it. So now we're going to go and say, oh, we're going to go from something broken to none of us knowing what we're doing, but we'll get it. Yep. I do think the field, there's been even more angst because they do have tablets in the field. They have for several years now, but it's been limited in what they needed to do with the technology piece. We have started dual meetings with customer service and field service that, there was a little concern it wouldn't go well, just like you said, the us versus them mentality. But it came off, we've had a couple of them now, it came off very well. What are your concerns, or how can we get this better? What's broken to you? What's broken to us?
So with that, I mean, again, I don't need to call it out, but I will. It's communication seems to be this magic formula that isn't maybe taught so well, that maybe if we just bring people in on it, it will relieve a lot of the barriers. But on a user experience, UX, it's called a lot with the software. For Greg, your field guys, as different crews that you've worked with, here's a tablet, here's a smartphone for this different type of meter change out software for documentation, so the contractor can get paid. It has to be done a certain way. What have you seen in, people adapting it? Have you seen software that's just a nightmare? It's so difficult for the guys to use. Have you seen others that are good? Is the common denominator the guys just don't want to work with you? What have you seen there?
So, I mean, at the beginning of my career, 11 or 12 years ago, everybody I was trying to teach how to do all this stuff was twice or my age. And it was actually more difficult then than it is now, I think. I think either people are adopting it easier because technology isn't going away, or maybe people are just getting more used to it because their TV is more similar now to a phone, especially smart TVs are built on Android technology, so they're kind of like a phone. I don't know if some of those things are helping, but I definitely find that it's easier, and there's even less pushback, even from some of the oldest guys that I've seen around. And there's a few that I know personally that are retiring, and they're in their mid-70s.
Yep. So I can tell you, my mom can move around in her iPad more easily than I can. So it again, 10 years ago, that obviously was not the case. So I want to switch. Another step here is you guys decide to get a system. You're talking about it internally. We're doing a great job of bringing in different departments. You've got some buy-in. Now all of a sudden the demos start, right? You're getting the demos and everybody's product is the best, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do, right? There's a bunch of suppliers on this call right now. They got great products. And how did you guys feel comfortable that you were buying the right system, right? There's a lot out there. And how did you cut through the sales and get to what was good for you? Steve Cox, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I think I've told you this before, Drew. I had a tank salesman who always said, I'd ask him a question, and before I even got the question out, he would say, yes. I don't get paid to say no. And so that's what a lot of these software folks do. They're going to say that their system does everything, or we can make it do everything. And that scares the heck out of me. So I think that was the value of bringing an independent third-party integrator in who was tied to no platforms and said, we need you to hold our hand, sit through these demonstrations. You're going to be able to see through the BS. We may not. Help us understand exactly what they can do from that perspective. That really was the key to our success, I feel.
Do you think I think, because this is, conversations that we've have with utilities all over the place, is, well, we know we do this. Well, how do we do it? We know what we do, but we don't know what these guys do. And then actually when we go through that process, because we do it remote, we close our eyes. I can walk through my room at night. I know where it is, right? Doesn't mean it's the best layout. So with that, let's talk a little bit with Wayne I'm going to go right to the financial side. As we started to dig in your case on how it was being done, right? I'm going to give a visual aid here of what people think is what's going on. And so here's a typical workflow for the high level billing. Kathleen, Steve, Wayne, Steve Gregoire, your department. When you think of billing, bills come in, you come out, all these interdependencies, right? And finding out what exactly is broken comes out pretty clear when you put it in black and white, right? So what was that process like Wayne, on the accounting side. Accounting is accounting, right? What did you find was the differences of like, how could your existing accounting system be broken? What made it to where it was worth the switch?
Well, I think part of it I credit to Steve, who asked all the right questions, because I equate what we were experiencing to sort of being like a lobster. You cook them slowly in the pot, and you really don't realize until you're almost done that you're done. And because we had our current system for almost 20 years, at one point in time, it was meeting all of our needs, most of our needs. It did okay. But I think as technology changed and our needs changed, they didn't grow with us. And I think that was the big problem. But we developed workarounds. For example, myself and my staff and the finance side, we have dozens, literally dozens of spreadsheets to do monthly reporting to the board, et cetera, audit schedules, all that should come right off of our financial software. And so because we got a general ledger, with a trial balance and, very little report capability, we had to go off the books into Excel. But we did it for years and we got more efficient at it, but it really wasn't the best way to do it. And, it's only gotten worse over the last few years.
So with that, I want to ask, because, and again, this is something, we're involved in projects that people think they need a new system, right? This is broken. And then when you start to dig in of how broken it is and what's it really going to gain for the utility, right? There's these, is it worth it, right? Now, sometimes it might be a great customer portal that's going to make it better for the customer, maybe, right? There's really no ROI there, right? It's not like we're going to make more money. We're going to spend more money and we're gaining this intangible. In other processes, we see, especially on the field side with asset management or dispatching or work orders, it saves hours and hours of employee time that has an ROI for the utility. Steve Gregoire, your current system that you're upgrading to, it's irrelevant of whose brand it is or what it is. What made you upgrade your new meter reading system? What was the difference? You have one. What was the value to your utility to go through another upgrade?
Yeah, that's a good question. The old system, which was, it's Itron system, it was their earlier version of it, was adequate. It read the meters, it produced a data file. The town was able to import it into their billing software. They had just converted their billing software to something new, and luckily for me, that's done at town hall. I don't have to get involved in it too much, but there are repercussions of their changes. Depending on what industry you're in, we all know stuff rolls downhill. So they were having trouble on the town hall end, reviewing some of their reads, their highs, their lows, some real basic comparisons and history of someone's reading file. So we had started doing some snooping around. It turns out the newest version of Itron is a heck of a lot more in-depth and intuitive on doing that. And we can handle more of it right down here in the water department office before we hand that read file over, and hopefully help them cut through some of the headaches they're having on the billing side. When we give them a read file, we can give it to them with more confidence in the reads and say, you're good to go, run the bills. And then they can follow that flow chart that you showed earlier, which again, I'm glad I have very little to do with.
So an interesting thing there is, and this is for, there's multitude of utilities that we work with that are on, Census, Badger, Neptune. I don't want to forget people in my, because there's a bunch of distributors on the call. I don't want to think I'm leaving everybody out, but all of the meter reading systems have upgraded to a degree. So I'm calling out on Steve, what you're doing, that even though you're a utility that you're not doing an AMI upgrade, talk to your distributor and figure out what the newest software is for their meter reading to get more information. And it's a small amount of money that will give you more tools. Because I think everybody thinks, oh, we have what we have, and we're not going to spend $6 million, $12 million on a new AMI. See what you can get out of your system, because the value prop, Steve, that you just mentioned about is something that, you know, I think a lot of utilities are sitting on. They don't know that for X amount of dollars, they can do that.
Data integrity is probably the #1 most important thing to put at the front of the list. Making sure that your data is good before you start the program, as you're doing the program, and when you're done with the program is probably the #1 most important thing. You know, upgrading in technology to like a barcode scanner to grab the serial numbers off of something might be $100 investment off of Amazon, will save way more money than you could imagine, just for something as simple to implement as that.
That's a very interesting thing, because when we get into inventory systems, we have seen a wide gamut and unbelievable costs, and it's a lot of money, or it can be done simply. And the barcode scanner seems to be just the easiest way. So that is awesome. On the question I want to ask Steve Gregoire is, in your recent implementations, equipment purchases, again, no names, but what was something that you thought was going to be easy and turned into a train wreck, that if you could change a few things would have been easier?
There's no such thing as a train wreck. There are opportunities. You can smell the sarcasm, right? So, you know, we did, I'll agree 100% with Greg. Data integrity can be a huge roadblock. And when the town was upgrading their billing system, they found a ton of poor data. And some of it had stemmed from lifelong employees over there that did it their way. And they were part of implementing the previous billing system. And when something didn't work, they knew how to work around it. And that corrupted data snowballed downhill over the course of decades. Here we are going to the new system, and working with the town and the new employee that's handling it, they realized how bad it was. And we've spent, you know, months now cleaning up those data files so that, you know, you can move forward with confidence. And, you know, we have worked with outside vendors to help us clean up that data. Because some of it was just, you know, plain old over our head. You've got to understand how to read these data files, which are like, you know, the matrix. With some of the data, if you don't know how to work with it, and we've learned how to work with it by working with our vendors. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have good data, you're in trouble from the start.
Jason's asking the question, how did you get a third party in there? You know, was there an existing relationship, and how did you know it was a good fit with your existing software to the future software? So,
you know, it's kind of funny because all these things are based on trust. And I happen to be sitting in a webinar, and I was seeing this kind of goofy guy moderating it, and it was a pretty good webinar. And I said, wow, he's got some skills that I think he could help us out with. And at the same time, somebody he works with, her name was thrown out, and I'd heard that from a vendor before. And I said, I got to get these folks in, and I think you all know who I'm talking about. I got to get them in and talk to them and see if they can help us. And then it truly became not about them selling us an item. It became about creating a team for us, and they providing a service to us where our team is going to be fully integrated until we see this through. And trust and communication is how we ended up selecting.
So I know you're probably talking about Anne Marie, but that goofy guy, I have no idea what you're talking about. And, you know, so I want to switch over to Kathleen on a question of, I think it's going to be that same thread of the trust and communication that your team has shown in integrations. What was that like in dealing with the beginning of the implementation idea, and I'd say as a manager, managing and working with and listening to your folks directly? How did that evolve? Like, what was the process to where it gelled?
Yeah, well, you're right. The trust and communication are crucial. I also think inclusion. So there wasn't any like backroom discussions. An idea was floated that I heard in a leadership meeting. It was brought right to the team. We had meetings about it ourselves. And even, I wish I don't have a train wreck story for my own, but the billing part that we're going through right now, we have not completely implemented. We've done a lot of homework, profiles, provided them work, but it hasn't been like solely on me. Every single person on the team we had a Google Doc drive. All the documents were out there. We were requested information, and we kind of just like picked at it individually. So one person would go in and say, hey, I answered what I thought I knew. And then somebody else would do the same. And then, you know, once it got completed, we actually ran it by the treasurer and just said, you know, are we clear on what they're asking? It's gone so smooth that we just keep waiting for the bottom to fall out, but it hasn't. So yeah.
I'll knock on the wood for you. The one thing I want to call out to the team is anybody on this call who has ever thought of doing a billing implementation or has done a billing implementation, they generally range, depending on the size utility, 12 to 16 months. With Kathleen and her team and everybody involved, their start to finish date of kickoff is 6 months. And so the proactive planning, specifying what needs to be done, asking the questions proactively has had a massive impact on a success. I think they chose a great vendor because that vendor has truly stepped up. Wayne, I'm gonna ask you a question right now, and I hope it doesn't make you start having flashbacks or sweating profusely. But could you tell us about a recent train wreck in part of the implementation without specifics, and how what you could do to avoid it in the future?
Yeah, we began we're going from one vendor to many vendors. So we're going from 1 to 4. And the first one that we chose was our payroll software. And so had to start somewhere. And so, you know, we were very enamored with the product itself. And it seemed to, you know, initially start out okay, but we soon ran into some bumps and grinds. And the biggest one was probably our W-2s didn't come out right. And so everyone on staff really had to pull together, particularly in our accounting payroll staff. And it was really time consuming, but we got it done. We fixed the main part of the problem. We worked together, but we learned from it. And so essentially what we feel is you ought to do if you're doing that is understand all the details involved and ensure that your payroll administrator, I think, gets the proper level of training. And perhaps we rushed it a little bit, for sure. But lesson learned. We're not going to do that with the rest of the platforms that we're doing.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Drew, that it seemed like an easy home run. You know, payroll shouldn't be that difficult. But I think because of that, we didn't map it. The integration was not mapped as detailed as the customer service and billing integration, which we knew would be a Stephen King novel. That was detailed mapped, and that one's going smoothly. The one that wasn't mapped, not so smoothly. If I had to do it over again, I would even back up before that, and I would look at some of our policies and say, can we streamline some of our weird policies that we have in terms of payroll so that it follows today's standards for a payroll system. We probably could have tweaked that well in advance and it would have made it smoother.